It was a cold winter's day when an old man walked out onto a frozen lake, cut a hole in the ice, dropped in his fishing line, and began waiting for a fish to bite. He was there for almost 2 hours without even a nibble. When a young boy walked out onto the ice, cut a hole in the ice not too far from the old man, and dropped in his fishing line. It only took about a minute, and wham! A largemouth bass was hooked, and the boy pulled in the fish. The old man couldn't believe it, but figured it was just luck. But the boy dropped in his line again, and within just a few minutes, hooked another one. This went on until finally the old man couldn't take it anymore. He went on over to the boy and said,
"Son, I've been here for over 2 hours without even a nibble. You've only been here a few minutes and you've caught about half a dozen fish. How'd you do it?"
The boy responded, "Roo-raff-roo-reef-roo-rum-drum."
"What was that?"
the old man asked. Again, the boy responded, "Roo-raff-roo-reef-roo-rum-drum."
"Look,"
said the old man,
"I can't understand a word you're saying."
So the boy spat into his hand and he said, "You have to keep the worms warm." 3 friends, a rabbi, a Hindu holy man, and a lawyer, had car trouble in the countryside and asked to spend the night with a farmer. The farmer said,
"Yeah, there might be a problem. You see, I only have room for 2 to sleep, so one of you must sleep in the barn."
"No problem,"
chimed the rabbi.
"My people wandered in the desert for 40 years. I am humble enough to sleep in the barn for an evening in their memory."
With that, he departed to the barn, and the others bedded down for the night. Moments later, a knock was heard at the door. The farmer opened the door. There stood the rabbi from the barn.
"Well, what's wrong?"
asked the farmer. He replied,
"I am grateful to you, good sir, but I cannot sleep in the barn. There is a pig in the barn, and my faith believes that this is an unclean animal."
His Hindu friend agreed to swap places with him. But a few minutes later, the same scene reoccurred. There was a knock on the door.
"What's wrong now?"
the farmer asked. The Hindu holy man replied,
"I too am grateful for you helping us out. But there is a cow in the barn, and in my country, cows are considered sacred. I can't sleep on holy ground."
Well, that left only the lawyer to make the change. He grumbled and complained, but went out to the barn. Moments later, there was another knock on the farmer's door. Frustrated and tired, the farmer opened the door, and there stood the pig and the cow. A man calls home to his wife and says, "Honey, I have been asked to go fishing at a big lake up in Canada with my boss and several of his friends. We'll be gone for a week. This is a good opportunity for me to get that promotion I've been wanting. So would you please pack me enough clothes for a week and set out my rod and tackle box? We're leaving from the office and I will swing by the house to pick my things up. Oh, and please pack my new blue silk pajamas." The wife thinks this sounds a little fishy, but being a good wife, she does exactly what her husband asked. The following weekend, he comes home a little tired, but otherwise looking good. The wife welcomes him home and asks if he caught many fish. He says, "Yeah, lots of walleye, some bluegill, and a few pike. But why didn't you pack my new blue silk pajamas like I asked you to do?"
"I did,"
his wife replied.
"They're in your tackle box."
A priest, a doctor, and an engineer were waiting behind a particularly slow group of golfers one morning. The engineer, who was quite frustrated, said, "This is absurd! We've had to wait here for 15 minutes!" The doctor agreed. "I don't know, but I've never seen such incompetence on the golf course." The priest said, "Hey, here comes the groundskeeper. Let's go talk to him. Hey, George, what's going on with that group ahead of us? They're pretty slow, aren't they?" The groundskeeper replied,
"Oh, yeah, that's the group of blind firemen. They lost their sight last year when they put out a fire in the local chemical warehouse. We always let them play for free."
The 3 of them became very quiet. Then the pastor said, "That's sad. I think I will pray for them tonight." The doctor adds, "Good idea. I'll check with my buddy, the eye doctor. Maybe he can do something." The engineer shrugs. "Why don't they just play at night?" 3 men died on Christmas Eve and were met by St. Peter at the pearly gates.
"In honor of this holy season,"
St. Peter said,
You must each possess something that symbolizes Christmas to get into heaven.
The first man fumbled through his pockets and pulled out a lighter. He flicked it on and said, "It represents a candle."
You may pass through the pearly gates,
St. Peter said. The second man reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. He jingled them and said, "They're bells." St. Peter nodded.
You may pass through the pearly gates.
The third man started searching desperately through his pockets and finally pulled out a pair of skimpy panties. St. Peter looked at the man with a raised eyebrow and asked,
And just what exactly do those symbolize?
The man grinned and said, These are carols. A big-shot businessman had to spend a couple days in the hospital. He was a royal pain to the nurses because he bossed them around just like he did his employees. None of the hospital staff wanted to have anything to do with him. The head nurse was the only one who could stand up to him. One day, she came into his room and announced,
I have to take your temperature.
After complaining for several minutes, he finally settled down, crossed his arms, and opened his mouth.
No, I'm sorry.
The nurse stated.
But for this reading, I cannot use an oral thermometer.
This started another round of complaining, but eventually, he rolled over and bared his rear end. After feeling the nurse insert the thermometer, he heard her announce,
I have to get something. Now you just stay like that until I get back.
She left the door to his room open on her way out. He cursed under his breath as he heard people walking past his door laughing. After almost an hour, the man's doctor came into the room. "What's going on here?" asked the doctor. Angrily, the man answered, "What's the matter, Doc? Haven't you ever seen someone having their temperature taken?" After a pause, the doctor confessed, "Well, no, I guess I haven't. Not with a carnation, anyway." The day before Thanksgiving, a 60-year-old man living in Miami calls up his son in New York. "Listen, son, your mother and I are getting divorced. 35 years of misery is enough." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son screams. His dad says, "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer. I'm sick of her face and I'm sick of talking about this, so call your sister in Los Angeles and tell her." And then he hangs up. Now the son is worried, so he calls up his sister and informs her that their parents are breaking up. She says,
Like heck they're getting divorced.
then calls her father immediately.
You're not getting divorced.
She insists.
Don't do another thing. The two of us are flying home tomorrow to talk about this. Until then, don't call a lawyer, don't file a paper. Do you hear me?
And she hangs up. The man looks over, smiles at his wife, and says, "Okay, they're coming for Thanksgiving and paying for their own airfares."